The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in a letter dated 9 March 2022, reminded the national chairman of the APC caretaker and Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee, CECPC, that the provision in Section 81, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act 2022, which requires at least 21 days of notice before any convention, congress, or meeting conveyed for the purpose of merger and electing members of the executive committee, other governing bodies, or nominating candidates for any elective offices. In the light of this new development, the APC convention will need 21 days notice for INEC and must be signed by Bunia, the national secretary. Meanwhile, former chairman of the All Progressive Congress, APC caretaker, and Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee, CECPC, and Yobe State Governor, Mai Mala Buni, has appealed to President Muhammadu Buhari to allow him continue as the chairman of the committee until after the national convention of the party, which holds in the next 2 weeks. Essentially, it was learned that Buni had reached out to Buhari to forgive him of any perceived wrongdoings and allow him to return and conclude the convention in order to forestall any form of legal interpretation of his dramatic removal. In addition, some of the Yobe State Governor supporters, who were mainly first-time governors, have also pleaded with Buhari to allow the CECPC chairman to finish his assignment and hand over to the new executive that will be constituted at the National Convention and go away. A lot to unpack this morning, but Tundu, I said here 2 days ago that the drama has just started with the APC. The drama continues. Where is your popcorn, Tundu?
I know, right?
Yes.
But, for me, the issue when I'm watching all of this unfolding, and I do find it really dizzying and migraine-inducing, I have to say. I'm rather fragile. I'm sorry, it's stressful for me. But for me, what all of this is that we see all the inertia in governance. You don't see any of that in the political sphere. Politicians, when it comes to their interests, my goodness, they're up and doing and really gung-ho about it. The grass does not grow under their feet. But when it comes to ruling the country, governing the country, then, people are falling asleep at the wheel. I wish the same level of passion could be applied across the board. That's the first thing that strikes me about all of this. Do you see many politicians fighting for the rights of Nigerians the way they're fighting for themselves and their political survival? And for me, that's the greatest slap in the face in this entire issue. But now INEC has written this letter and thrown a spanner in the works. It's not going to be a seamless, segue from the Memala Buni era to the Sani Bello era, according to INEC's very politely but firmly worded letter. So Memala Buni, who has gone on this detour to London to go and meet with the president, might actually have some success in his venture because INEC has been quite clear and they are the electoral umpire.
I posited, and I always knew, that Memala Buni was going to fight back. It was not going to just go out like that. And that's why I was taken aback a little bit when Governor Nasir El-Rufai came on television a couple of days ago and said, we've sorted that out, the president has intervened, they would leave, we'll take care of them. So much for taking care of them. I remember when the case of Akpanudehe was raised, he said, we have a lot of lawyers. In fact, we have a professor of law right there, in the Convention Planning Committee, so he would take care of Akpanudehe. It is obvious. See what INEC has written. Now, another letter is surfacing that there was an official handover note. You see, these politicians, they are good in this act of drama. That there was a prior handover note of Memala Buni handing over to Sani Bello.
Which he didn't see.
Which he didn't see. But at first, they made it seem like a gestaporic move that they've taken him out. And from Dubai, rather than coming back home, guess where he's gone to? London. Can I say new seat of power? And he has gone there, prevailed with the president. Now, why is it that when all of this started, that's when you started seeing these letters everywhere? You saw the handover letter yesterday that was written prior before Memala Buni traveled. Now you're seeing INEC write this all out. It just shows that something is amiss. And that's why yesterday I explained them. I said they are like convoluted tubules in the kidney. They are the proximal convoluted tube in Memala Buni camp, and the distal convoluted tube, the 19 governors that want him out. So the 3 governors in the proximal convoluted tube in his camp that want him out, plus the senators. You see, this is drama, big time. 2 things I'll posit again. I doubt, I want to be proven wrong, if they're going to have that convention on the 26th.
Okay, 2 issues here. which we have also consistently established. One, that there is a battle for the soul of the APC. It is already established from the little experience that we have had in the Nigerian political space, that triumphant political parties always find it very difficult to manage success. The APC is about to make the same mistake as the PDP, failing to manage its success. The second part of it is that there is a battle for the soul of the APC. Now, how that battle is resolved is directly linked to 2023 and what happens to that party in terms of the dominance that it currently enjoys. The third part is that, okay, we've seen absolute confusion within the party. Where we're not seeing, okay, we've seen division, we've seen disagreement that attention was drawn to. Now we have seen confusion in absolute terms. What Governor Nasir Rufai told us originally, now Mai Mala Buni are suddenly waking up from his sickbed to come and fight for his own life, his own political career. He's saying he has simply called out Governor Nasir Rufai and others within the party to say that they're lying. He's saying that the president knows nothing about this and is going all the way to London to go and meet the president. So the president has a responsibility also to save his party, to ensure that he does not leave behind a platform, a damaged platform, the same platform that brought him to power. So at a personal level, I think President Buhari has that responsibility. However, what are the details? One, INEC has stepped in to throw the books at the APC, Section 82, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act, and to say that for you to make any new arrangements within your party, you have to give INEC, the electoral body, 21 days notice. And INEC is asking more or less for an explanation. And I said that under President, well, he may become president one day. Maybe that will become his luck. But, the head of INEC at the moment, the chairman of INEC, he has been very consistent in saying internal democracy is very important. One of the major statements that came out of the 2019 process. And now, under his watch again, the professor is telling INEC, you guys are toying with internal democracy. And this is what the rule book says. And I hope that, the leaders of the APC will be properly guided. And in this regard, the INEC has done very well. I hope INEC will just be also as proactive when other political parties violate rules of internal democracy and the guidelines that have been put down in the books. So how they respond to that, we will watch, because that will be part of the story. As for Mai Mala Buni rushing to London to go and meet the president, yes, the president is effectively the leader of the party. He's a major stakeholder, as I've said earlier, and his own legacy is at stake. But he's not the only one that we're told that is going there. We hear that a retinue of stakeholders are going also to London. I hope they will not disturb the president's medical leave. Because the president is there for, we are told, medical reasons. All of them are going there now. They're turning London to the new headquarters of Nigeria. But certainly, I'm sure that the president is following the situation. And the APC also must be reminded that they cannot make their own internal problems. They're controlling, decimal for the direction of Nigerian politics going forward. They are there to win power, yes, but they are also there to do good by the Nigerian people. The common good must be the ultimate issue. And let nobody come tomorrow now and say, hey, it's a family affair. ABC will resolve his problem, because that's the default position. They say it's normal for politicians to disagree, yes, but can they conduct themselves, as I said yesterday, after the fashion of gentlemen? Okay, the secretariat is shut down. Sani Bello is saying he never got a letter from Mai Mala Buni. But Mai Mala Buni is saying when he was going on medical leave, he asked Governor Bello to act on his behalf. So there will be new dimensions to this story, and those dimensions are everything to do with 2023, those who want to control the party. I've always said that the APC is an amalgamation of strange bedfellows. The CPC, the AMPP, the new PDP, the ANC. Now that Nigeria is facing a transition, you are seeing all of them now scrambling as if this was another 1884, for the soul of the party.
Berlin Conference. That's all on News at 11.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rota Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rota.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. And good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, we begin with the fact that oil prices now, with where they've been moving, have now impacting our budgets. Zainab Ahmed, Minister of Budget and National Planning at the 10th African Fiscal Forum, the theme was the political economy of fiscal reforms. And gosh, isn't Nigeria a country that needs fiscal reforms? She was speaking to journalists and said that essentially they're amending the budget in order to accommodate the increasing oil prices, which of course is causing the increase in landing cost of fuel, which is impacting what we're paying on subsidies. So remember, the president requested an additional 3 trillion, but now that is going to have to increase with where oil prices are. Apparently, our sweet spot's been $870 to $80, but with where oil is now above 120. That's also going to increase the deficit. The deficit is, I think, about 6.5 trillion. With this, with the addition, the amendments that they're going to be making, that, of course, is going to lead to a much wider deficit, and that is also going to lead to Nigeria having to borrow more. So we've seen with everything that's been going on, you're now seeing the impact now all the way from the top, from the federal government, cascading down to the average Nigerian on the street. Now, by the way, this was organized by the IMF. That's this 10th African Fiscal Forum. Speaking of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, who heads the IMF, she had a meeting with African ministers of finance, like Zainab Ahmed. She had a meeting with African central bank governors, and also the United Nations Economic Commissions for Africa, UNECA. And she said that Africa is vulnerable to what we're seeing in regards to Russia and Ukraine. So she mentioned 4 channels: food prices, fuel prices, lower tourism revenue, and also possibly an impact on access to international capital markets. The idea being that if your fiscal structure is adversely affected by the increase in prices, and look at what's happening with our budget, for instance, then that could raise a red flag for creditors and so on international capital markets if you try to access funds, because they're going to look like, hey, you've got your COVID issues you're trying to face, now you've got this Russia-Ukraine war that's affecting your prices. So the ability for you to be able to pay back the capital you're trying to access at borrowed rates might be hindered. So those are the 4 channels: food, fuel, tourism, and international capital markets. The same issue at the 4th annual Food Processors and Nutrition Leadership Forum. Aliko Dangote, chair of the Dangote Group, and also Mr. Boye Olusanya, the CEO of Flour Mills of Nigeria. They were in attendance with Osaige Ehanire, the Minister of Health, Niyi Adebayo, the Minister of Trade and Investment, talking about particularly wheat and fertilizer. So Dangote was, talking about how Russia and Ukraine, Russia in particular, accounting for about 30% of the world's, I think, urea, about 26% of phosphate, and how the increased prices in fertilizer will have a spillover effect onto food production, which will make that more expensive. And said, food producers will probably have to sit down with the federal government to figure out what to do. Also wheat, I think between the two of them, Ukraine, Russia, they're both in the top 5. And so wheat prices, that of course, will also spill over into bread, confectionaries, and so on and so forth. So this is something that is across, as everyone's talking about this now. I mean, it's Zainab Ahmed, Aliko Dangote, everybody's discussing this. NARTO, remember we talked about them last month, about how National Association of Road Transport Owners, where they were saying that they could stop moving around of transporting fuel from depots to fuel stations because the cost of diesel is so high. And when we talked about that back in February, diesel was 450 or 400 to 400. Now, Above 500, they're saying that it's just unaffordable and they can't continue. And then finally, we spoke with Mary Chinda yesterday on the Global Business Report. This was now for aviation, where she spoke with a flyer about, us is a frequent flyer, about the impact of the aviation fuel scarcity on airlines and the impact it's having on prices. So take a listen.
Well, the increase in airfare it's terrible. I won't lie to you. It makes it harder for you to. In fact, if you want to do anything, like me now, what I do is I fly in regions. Like if I'm going to this eastern area, take a flight to the east and make sure that all the things I'm doing is going to be in the east. So I'll go from there to another place and everything, finish up there, then fly back to another region. If I'm doing something in Lagos, Kaduna, and all this, I'll land in. Kaduna, Kano, and all this. I'll land in Abuja, do all my movements. Though it's not safe, that's why most people prefer flying to every single location they're going to. But what can we do? It's getting too costly. It's two locations. The least you can spend is 100,000. That's enough to start off a business. You understand? It's crazy, but it's what can we do?
What can we do? So concerning diesel prices, there are variations in prices. It's not even over 600. Some were selling 750. There was some depot, that said the depot price like 750 and they will sell for 800, 850. Some are buying 800, 850. NATO has been complaining for quite a while. At some point they said, okay, they were threatening the strike. But the truth is, all of this crisis, it just shows you that we're all tied together. All of this crisis in the world, increase of fuel price, has affected our budget. And the fact that we don't refine here, so we have to pay huge subsidies to get products in, it's affected food. It's affected everything. I think there was also a story about Aliko Dangote saying that we should be careful with our export of maize.
Right, because, that was at this forum.
Because we might have a shortfall, and the shortfall might really come back to bite us. And the fact that we don't have enough wheat. You were talking about Russia and Ukraine. I think Ukraine does about 16% of global wheat. Russia does about 20% or thereabout of global wheat. So cumulatively, they've got like close to over 30% of global wheat. So all of that bites into the economic indices. And the question is, are we ready for this? I doubt it.
Yeah, so what do we do?
Doubt it. That's why we need to look inward now, tighten our belt if possible, do the needful, cut our coat according to our size. I've always been the one that argue, is this the time we should be doing infrastructural budgets when we don't have the money for it? Honestly, I thought that budget was too big.
Well, Rotus, all of this is simple. Whatever is happening now is foreseeable. It's a no-brainer that the cost of wheat has gone up, the cost of maize has gone up, because Russia supplies most of the maize. Ukraine is a major supplier of corn to Russia, to China. Okay, so all of this is bound to have global implications. And the fact that the Nigerian budget has been upended, okay, that was also predicted. Before now, the GMD of NNPC said, look, the comfortable zone for us would be $70 to $80 per barrel. Now, Brent crude is over $130. Now, if you look at it in terms of the budget projection, then, of course, we're clearly in trouble. And we have to borrow. We have to provide more subsidy to a population that cannot even travel from Ibadan to Lagos in a train. Because there is no diesel. People, one of these days, you are going to hear that an aircraft traveling in Nigeria, lost fuel. Unfortunately, there's no parking space. There's no parking space in the air. No, it will happen.
It better not happen.
It better not happen.
So, but my final point, since we don't have time, so that I don't go on and on, is a poem by Professor J.P. Clark, Casualties.
Oh, I love that.
And Professor J.P. Clark, now blessed memory, had said that in a war situation, we are all casualties. So we should not be surprised. If I have time, I could just read some
Please,
of
Doctor, give it to us.
This is J.P. Clark. The casualties are not only those who are dead, they are well out of it. The casualties are not only those who are dead, though they await burial by installment, which is what we're going through. The casualties are not only those who are lost, persons or property, hard as it is, to grow for a touch that some may not know is not there. The casualties are not only those led away by night. The cell is a cruel place, sometimes a haven, nowhere as absolute as the grave. The casualties are not only those who started a fire and now cannot put it out. Thousands are burning that have no say in the matter. The casualties are not only those who are escaping. The shattered shall become prisoners in a fortress of failing walls. The casualties are many, and a good number as well. Outside the scenes of ravage and wreck, they are the emissaries of rift. So small, in smoke rooms they hunt abroad. The drums overwhelm the guns, caught in the clash of counter claims and charges. When not in the niche, others left. We fall, all casualties of the war.
You gotta get doctor to officiate a wedding or do some open mic night poetry.
I love that.
That's very good.
I mean,
I do wish it wasn't so timeless, but it is, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Rota.
Thank you.
Moving on now to more business update. Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Volatility like you've never seen overnight. Oil, you touched on it. I mean, moving in a range of $9 is extraordinary. But that's what's been going on. The Ukrainian-Russian talks yielded nothing at all. So Asia Pacific, I've got some interesting central bank view about the post-pandemic landscape. A Bank of Japan official, now listen to this, has said that economic and price conditions don't allow for a withdrawal of too much of the stimulus. And I think that's being echoed in China as well. It's quite important because what they're clearly saying is that whatever they say publicly, the actual fact of what's going on is weakening all these kind of huge economies. It's been a sea of red, basically, as far as Asia's concerned. The Nikkei down about 2%, South Korea down 1%, China down 2%, Hong Kong. I'll come on to actually why Hong Kong's suffered today. And what this is, let's move to Hong Kong and have a look at some of these dual-listed Chinese stocks. Some of these companies have plunged because they're worried about US retaliation. You know, we've had this market stuff between the various countries. And so Hong Kong shares of China-listed companies down a lot today. And the UBS Global Wealth Management are saying, for one, that they still like these stocks, but it's not a market for the faint-hearted. I'll come on to that theme later on. As far as the United States is concerned, stock futures lower. The Dow's heading for a fifth straight losing streak, basically. Futures on the Dow about 50 points down. That's futures, not what happened yesterday, which you'll probably know about. It dipped 112 points yesterday, so even futures are down. And the week to date, the Dow is down 1 point, just over 1%. Some people would say, given what's going on in the world, that's not too bad, but it's still on a downward. Well, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are joining the exodus from Russia. We've noted the corporations that are no longer open in Russia, and now the big Wall Street firms look steady to leave. And this is very much in line with recommendations from the US government as well. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has talked about, once again, another year of what she describes as uncomfortably high inflation. I think regular viewers would note that we've been talking about this for some time. And the war in Russia is going to create that for all the reasons that you've just been talking about. Amazon shareholders will like this. They're on the verge of a 20-to-1 share split, and that's pushed the price up. The share price quite high, almost to where it was when Amazon released its fourth quarter earnings last month, which were spectacularly good. You touched on the IMF earlier in the program, and the managing director. She's actually saying also that their global view is going to be affected. Their global forecast is going to be affected. They talked about growth of 4.4% in 2022. Now that's what they said in February. Not quite sure which way it's going to go. I mean, in fact, how much? But they are going to reduce it quite a lot. The ECB, an interesting meeting yesterday. I think this will overshadow the markets today as well. They're increasingly hawkish, not so much about interest rates, but certainly about withdrawing some of the pandemic aid packages, and European markets will probably return to their overnight slide as a result of that. Oil, I touched on oil, huge amount of noise from that market, as you imagine. Nobody has any idea what's going on, and it really is, again, a market not for the faint-hearted. The volatility has been huge. I mean, that $9 a barrel, no reason to suppose it won't go further. Gold is continuing to trade sideways until there's a major international development between Russia and Ukraine or something else, and then it'll have the usual effect that it does. Just looking back on the week, I know I was sort of traveling over the past 2 days, but we didn't really talk a lot about nickel, but that actually surprised a lot of people, we think. I mean, that was getting to $100,000 a ton. You know, it's never been anywhere near there. And as one market observer told me this morning, just lost touch with reality. The London Metal Exchange, upon which it's traded, is still looking for a way of getting back to orderly business. And this is interesting. The stress test that they've done got nowhere near this. They've done an increase of 26% in the price of any commodity to see how the market would react to that. And we got this huge thing, mainly because of some Chinese short selling. That's what they think is being happened now. And the message really to everybody over the weekend: stay safe and batten down the hatches. That's what the markets are telling us in this global view this morning.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I want to go back to your story about JP Morgan. There's also Western Union in this exodus out of Russia. But Russia is responding by threatening to nationalize production plans and factories of companies that leave. Obviously, this has been described by the US as, unlawful, but since when has that stopped, Vladimir Putin? Do you actually think that it will be a deterrent to stop other Western companies leaving Russia?
Okay, so what it's doing, if they do that's not happened since 1917, when the Bolsheviks said no more private businesses in Russia. So it's setting back the whole economy to about 100 years if they do that. Number two, it sends a long-term signal to overseas investors about Russian debt to start with. Will they actually go into a country which is threatening to nationalize? To me, it's another way of looking at the world in a kind of upside-down way. That's the long-term message that kind of nationalization would send out, and I can't see why Russia would do that. As you quite rightly say, what's to stop them? Nothing at all. But that's the kind of message that would be sending out. It's extraordinary.
But isn't it clear that Russia has found itself in a binary situation, Manichaean situation, us versus them? And pressure is being mounted heavily on Russia in a manner that even the Russian leaders did not expect. People are losing their jobs. The economy is being shut down, literally. Okay? So do they have an option in the matter than to also hit back? Although the United States is saying they don't think that will happen. But what if they do it and they damn the consequences? What will be the implications, not just for Russia, but the rest of the world?
Are you talking about poison gas and biochemical weapons and a nuclear attack on the rest of the world? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean more economic sanctions coming the other way from Russia?
Yes, that's what I mean.
What, the economic sanctions? What could they possibly
do?
Yeah. I have absolutely... Okay, so you've already been talking about wheat, you've been talking about energy, you've been talking about food suppliers, and so on. All of them are feeling the problems that everybody else around the world is feeling. Now Russia is in the kind of state. Which way will Russia go? I do not know, and nor does anybody else. I sort of understand what the playbook might be. What is the end game? It will end up isolated one way or the other until Putin actually goes, and there will be presumably big political discussions about this. Some people are saying this is playing right into the United States' hands, which actually wants to do damage to Russia. All right, that's one thing. But there are two big important players who have not actually said a great deal yet. India, which I should tell you, of course, as you probably know, has just been through an election which has put Narendra firmly back in power again. And China, well, we've heard a little bit about how they might see themselves as a negotiating force. But I think when those two economies decide what they're going to do, and I certainly include India in this, maybe for the first time, they are a growing power. There's no question about this. The population of that country is absolutely massive. These are the things that people in Russia, that the Russian leaders need to be looking at to find out if they can compete and what their message might be and how that affects the global balance. I cannot be other than very vague about it, but those would be the areas to which I would be looking if I were in power in Russia, which of course I'm not.
All right, Michael, we don't have time. We have to go now, but I'll just make a couple of comments. If Putin goes ahead to nationalize those companies, I'm sure he should probably look back in history and learn from Fidel Castro, just what he did to the American companies and corporations in Cuba back in the days. What happened? He couldn't run them, plunge the people into more poverty, and that'll be his lot. It just shows in all of this, Putin doesn't have an end game. This is probably the beginning of the end of Putin. It's just sad that the whole world will suffer for it now, but everybody will be the better for it in the future. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesuwa Moro is here with us. Adesuwa, good morning. Great to have you.
Good morning, Rufai. Great to be here again. Good morning,
Morning,
Tunde,
yeah.
and good morning, Dr. Abati.
Morning.
Well, let's take a look at the COVID-19 pandemic dashboard for one last time this week. Meanwhile, and that's by the Johns Hopkins University, the dashboard. Meanwhile, globally, during the week of 28th of February through the 6th of March, the number of new COVID-19 cases and deaths globally continue to decline by 5% and 8% respectively. And that's according to the WHO Epidemiological Weekly Report. Across the 6 WHO regions, over 10 million new cases and 52,000 new COVID deaths were reported for that period. At the regional level, only the Western Pacific region continued to report an increase. They saw a 46% increase in the number of new weekly cases in that region, while the number of new weekly deaths increased also in that same region of the Western Pacific, as well as the Eastern Mediterranean. Well, they saw 29% increase and a 2% increase respectively. There have been decreases in the number of deaths by the African region. It saw 39% in the period. The European region saw 15% drop. The region of the Americas saw 9%, and the Southeast Asia region saw a 3% decline in deaths for that period. And the WHO has warned that the Russia-Ukraine war was likely to result in undetected transmission of COVID-19 cases. Well, here in Nigeria, the NCDC says so far 60 people evacuated from Ukraine have now tested positive for the COVID-19. The cases were reported in Abuja and Lagos. We know that that's where we've been seeing these returnees arrive mostly. Actually, I think those are the 2 airports at the moment where you have them arriving. And more than 700 or more than 800, because I know a flight arrived in the wee hours of today. More than 800 Nigerians have now been evacuated from Ukraine, and we're expecting more to return over this weekend. The government is looking to evacuate about 5,000 of its citizens, so we are likely to see more positive cases of COVID-19 as authorities ensure to collect samples before the evacuees leave the airport or exit the airports to be reunited with their loved ones. But in the last 24 hours, the official reports from the NCDC shows that 33 new cases and no COVID-19 related deaths were reported from Lagos, Rivers, Imo, Kaduna states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. And as at March 9, 18.7 million targeted eligible Nigerians have received a vaccine dose, while 9.3 million others have been fully vaccinated. And in other stories worth mentioning this morning, the WHO has issued a guidance advising people on how to test themselves for the coronavirus. The Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said the agency was concerned that some countries are dramatically reducing their COVID-19 testing as the virus appears to be receding in some parts of the world. Some activists have long called for the WHO to make this recommendation so that people can self-test and donors can buy these kits that are mostly unavailable in the poorer countries. Hopefully, with these recommendations by the WHO, we can now see donors buy those kits and send to these poorer countries, and people can begin to test themselves rather than relying on government institutions to get tested. And that does a lot of things. It helps us to track this virus and stop it as quickly as possible. And finally, in the US, mask mandates are being lifted across the country. However, airlines and airports will not be added to the list for at least another 1 month. The CDC said that the Transport Security Administration's mask mandate, which requires travelers to mask up on airplanes, trains, buses, at the airports, in train stations, will be extended through to April 18th. This is the 4th extension since it was first put in place in January 2021. Back to you guys.
Well, there's really no room to be complacent, is there? And this is yet another unintended ripple effect of the war happening in Ukraine. The fact that some people are going to now test, positive for COVID in Nigeria as a result of those returnees who will invariably infect people. Hopefully, they will infect those who do not have, pre-existing medical conditions and who are fully vaccinated. And we don't have casualties here as a result of a war going on halfway across the world.
Well, quickly, let's start with the United States. You see the point you made about the Center for Disease Control, saying that it's going to extend the mask mandate for another month. Well, that is in response to maybe perhaps the observation that when it comes to transportation, the infection rate may be going up. But the question that the critics are asking is that, okay, if you are saying for transportation, for planes, for buses, for airlines, people should use the mask for another 1 month. How about theaters, movies, that people, attend and they no longer have in many parts of the United States to use, the mask. So there's a contradiction there, in my view. But of course, that mask mandate that was originally in place was to expire on March 18. So what they've done is to move it to April 18. And that's for transportation. But it doesn't apply to public outdoor gatherings. As we have seen in many parts of the United States, in Mississippi, New York, and elsewhere, that the mask mandate has been relaxed. And all of this is in line with the early March State of the Union address by the President of the United States, President Joe Biden, when he said it's time now to get America back to work. Okay? And that's the sentiment in other parts of the world, in the Netherlands, in Israel, even in the United Kingdom, where we have seen people getting tired of these COVID restrictions. So that's where it is. I mean, United Airlines, one of the major companies that impose, COVID mandate on its staff, they just took a decision that the 200 workers that they sacked last year, November or so, that they can now come back to work next month. And these are workers who had refused to take the vaccine. So this is the kind of thing that we see all over the world. As for Nigeria and the returnees from the conflict zone in Ukraine, yes, you've just said some of them have, COVID, they are infected. But the question is, okay, how is the Nigerian government, or if you like, the relevant authorities, are they addressing this? Because it's not something that we should be surprised about, because the government itself said, well, because this is an unusual situation, just come home. You don't need to take a pre-COVID test. So if you have any information as to what the relevant authorities are doing to minimize the damage and to attend to those who are infected, that I think should be of interest.
And I think they're taking COVID tests on arrival, because I've seen a couple of them take COVID tests once they arrived into the country.
Yeah, that's why they took so long at the airport.
Yeah, so that's why they took so long at the airport.
Yes.
But secondly, I think most importantly, what we should do is we should ramp up the numbers of COVID vaccination. It's still very appalling. It's less than 5% at this hour. It's less than 5% for a country of over 200 million people. Less than 5%. We've not even started yet. So I don't see why we can't ramp it up. If possible, take it to marketplaces everywhere possible. And, encourage people to take the vaccine in the first place. Nigerians are not taking the vaccine, and I don't know what is happening. We've got a big nation here.
But they're already in the marketplaces, Rufai.
But the uptake is low.
We have to centralize this COVID-19 vaccination. So I think the strategy may be wrong. Perhaps we need to persuade people more, like you said.
Yeah,
the vaccines are there, but the people are not taking them.
So why? Why are they not taking them? Are we doing enough? Can we incentivize them and all of that? Because you see, those vaccines we have that people are not taking will soon hit their shelf life, and we have to bring in more vaccines, and the cycle continues. And we have to waste all the resources we don't even have in the first place, with a budget that's already on its knees.
Well, thank you very much, Adesuwa Omoran.